Welcome to my demo of painting marbles in watercolor. This painting is based on a reference photograph by Russell Dean. Although I really like Russell's composition, the proportions do not work for a full-size sheet of watercolor paper, and I have to make some cropping decisions. So I decide to crop it in this way. I start off by drawing the reference image in detail on a 30 by 22 Arches watercolor sheet, 300-pound cold press. After completing my drawing, it's time to mask out the widest areas of the image. I am going to use Incredible White Mask Liquid Frisket, and for more detailed masking, I will use the Molotow Graphics Art Masking Fluid Marker. I put a touch of dish soap on the tip of my brush. Be sure you don't use nice brushes. A cheap brush or an old brush will do, as the masking fluid will ruin the bristles. I rub in a little dish soap and dip directly into my masking fluid without rinsing it out. Masking fluid dries out quickly and starts gumming up on a brush or whatever tool you're using to apply it. It gums up quickly, and I found that the dish soap helps slow down that process, keeping it more fluid for a longer application. I start off by masking the largest shapes that I see in my reference picture that are white. These glass reflections are really important for capturing the drama and roundness and shininess of my marbles. I start off by masking the biggest areas and work down to smaller and smaller areas as I work around the image. Masking fluid dries out quickly and will start to gum up my brush or any other application tool I'm using. Off to the right, you can see a cup I have. It's filled with water and more dish soap. I use it to rinse out my tools as much as needed to keep them from gumming up. I am painting the masking fluid onto the largest, widest shapes that I see in my reference image. I have the image up on my laptop, which you can see in the left-hand corner. And this allows me to enlarge and zoom in on any areas that might be unclear. I pay careful attention to the shapes and the edges of these masked areas. It's important to paint in your masking carefully. As the painting proceeds and we paint over these areas and eventually remove the masking fluid, the shapes we leave behind with the white of the paper really will stand out. And if those edges are not correct or were painted hastily, you'll spend a lot of time correcting those shapes and those edges. It's better to take the time up front to paint them in carefully. I work my way around the entire painting this way, picking out the largest white shapes I see in my reference picture. As masking fluid starts to dry on my brush and gum up, I'll rinse it out in the dish soap water. I don't bother rinsing it out in clear water after that. Then I dip right back into my white masking fluid and start painting again into these masked areas. Every once in a while, the masking fluid gums up so much on the brush that just rinsing it out in soapy water isn't enough. At those times, I rinse it out and then I work in another drop of dish soap into the brush to help the masking fluid stay liquid enough to be brushed on easily. As I work my way around the reference image, I will turn my sheet of paper around for easier access. When I do that, I also turn my reference image around. It makes it easier to track what white spots I need to still mask. This is slow observational work. I enjoy picking out all these white areas in the reference photo and then finding them on my painting and masking them. So take your time doing this. Here you'll see me just continue to work my way around painting these shapes. Here I stop to rinse out my brush. It's really starting to gum up. So I get the dish soap out and work another drop into it. As far as how often you have to do this, it really depends on how quickly your masking is drying on your brush and how difficult you find to use your brush. As long as you can apply the masking fluid with some degree of control and fluidity, you don't have to stop and keep rinsing it out or soaping it up. I only do it as I find I need to. As I rotate my watercolor paper to more easily access the areas I want to mask, I remember to also rotate my reference picture. It can be challenging to keep track of all the white shapes that I want to mask, so definitely keeping my reference picture and my painting oriented in the same direction will cut down on the confusion. I've worked my way around all four sides looking for the biggest shapes, and now I'm starting to get into the smaller shapes, middle size, and eventually detailed. And I work my way around again in the same way. It serves the same purpose, and for all intents and purposes, is the same as what I'm using here. It's just that the applicator in the form of a marker allows me to get into small, precise shapes. At this point, some of the shapes that I want to mask are really small. And it's difficult to do with a brush since the brush just does not keep its nice fine point as you use masking fluid with it. For those shapes, I'm going to use the masking fluid marker. Unlike this masking fluid I am using, which is white to clear, the marker I will use is blue and will really stand out. Essentially, it is just masking fluid. Even the masking fluid that comes in bottles that can be painted on, like what I used earlier, can be bought in blue and in orange. I prefer using the white clear masking, as I find that this tinted masking fluid can tend to affect my color choices. However, I could not find any masking fluid that comes out of a marker that is white or clear. So I chose this blue Molotow marker. It does allow for quite a bit of precision and controlled application. The tip dries out occasionally, as can be expected with masking fluid. Instead of sticking it in water, I just rub a little bit of the masking fluid that gums up on the tip right off with my fingers and then get back to applying. You'll see me work my way around some of the smaller detailed areas with this marker. If you find that you've masked the wrong area, or if you drop some masking fluid with your brush on an area you didn't mean to apply it, allow it to dry completely and then just peel it off. Do not try to pick it up while it is wet or using a wet rag or wet brush to try to pick it up. The water will only help bond the masking fluid to your paper and it'll never come out at that point. So in order to pick up any masking fluid, Allow it to completely dry first. This is true whether you're trying to remove masking from watercolor paper or furniture or clothing or your carpeting. I know it's easy to panic if you spill some and rush to it with a wet cloth, but I really suggest you hold off and let it dry completely. Some of these shapes that I'm painting in now with masking fluid are just too big to bother with the marker, so I get my brush back out and paint in these bigger areas. Don't apply the masking fluid too thickly. One coat is really enough. I work my way around again using my reference picture and carefully picking out any small little white shapes that I want to preserve. Again, this is slow observational work. Don't rush through this. I decide to also mask off a few areas that are not completely white, such as along the edge of this light struck marble. I want to preserve that there is a little bit of a glow, of a halo around this edge. I'm working my way through the edges all the way around the painting. I don't want to overdo it with the masking fluid because I know that all these white shapes will really stand out later. And if I don't want them, I'll have to paint and scrub at them, lifting out paint or dropping in paint to make them fuse into the rest of the image. I'm putting in my last few marks. You can see me hesitating as I observe my reference picture and my painting and determine which last few shapes I want to preserve. Once we're done applying masking fluid, we have to set aside the painting and let the masking completely dry before we can paint. It's not always easy to judge when the masking fluid is dry because it remains tacky to the touch even when it is dry. I just play it safe and don't start painting until the next day. As my eyes go back and forth between my painting and the reference picture, I decide that I am done masking. To double check, I look at it at an angle, letting the light reflect off of my masking fluid. This can give me a better idea if I've hit all the areas I wanted to get. Now I'm ready for painting.